Good morning. This is Mike Macumber with Adams Insurance. Our topic of discussion today is a fleet safety training module dealing with various aspects of fleet safety and driver safety. This session that we're looking at right now is entitled An Attitude Adjustment, a Necessity for Safe Driving. Your attitude as a driver is something that must be really looked at. Some of us are very cautious drivers. Some are individuals who are very aggressive and in their personal life, and they're aggressive behind the wheel. The attitude is not necessarily good or bad, but how much it is under control is the issue. We're going to talk about a number of things in relationship to attitude, and then we're going to talk about your personality as a driver in this section. This section is hopefully designed to help you look at yourself, to analyze yourself, and come to a conclusion as to your strengths and your weaknesses, and then purpose to strengthen your weaknesses. There are some principles that I want us to talk about. First of all, safety is an ethical responsibility. Safety is not something that you can take or leave it. It is something that is truly your ethical responsibility. How you behave as an operator behind the wheel will determine your safety, the safety of others around you, and also the safety of your safety as it impacts your family. As an individual who's been in this industry for multiple decades and handled every type of auto accident you can think of, I have handled many fatalities. And I'm sure every driver who killed himself or someone else thought he was a safe driver and was not doing anything wrong. And then, of course, the accident happens. Secondly, safety is a culture, not a program. In other words, every one of us has our own safety culture as it relates to work, as it relates to our personal lives, and as it relates to how we drive. My goal here is to have you re-examine and to look at your personal safety culture, not to have us judge it, but to have you judge it and determine what it is and how it can become better. Thirdly, safety is a condition of employment. You've worked for a company, you're watching this video because you drive a company vehicle. That's not a right, that's a privilege. That's something that you have a responsibility to take great care as you handle the property of your company and as you represent them in the workforce. Fourthly, safety is something that prevents injuries. No one likes to get hurt. And so therefore, we want to make sure as a driver, you are considering your aspects, your attitude, and what you do. Safety also, there are some tips that we all need to be considering as we're driving in the world we live in. First of all, be aware of your surroundings. You know, you are responsible for the other guy. I know that seems unfair. You should be only responsible for yourself, but I don't think you feel any better if you're doing everything right and somebody plows into you and knocks you off the road. The issue is you've got to watch out for the other guy. Secondly, you need to keep a correct attitude and personality while you're driving. I have seen many different types of drivers. My favorite are those who get very excitable because they get excited behind the wheel. Have you ever been with someone who talks to the other drivers and says all kinds of things about their personality and their lineage as you're driving down the street? That's an excitable person. Again, that's not necessarily bad. It's only bad if it's uncontrolled and if it is not something that is adding to the process. Also, you need to take responsibility for yourself. That is something in our culture in America today is sadly lacking. People don't take responsibility for their actions. And as a driver, your actions may be the very thing that ends your life. So you need to take responsibility for your actions. And in taking responsibility for your actions, you need to report anything that you see as unsafe. If that vehicle you think is unsafe to drive, those brakes are just not hitting as well as you think, or there is a problem with the wipers or the lights, report it. Make sure they get fixed before you drive again. And if for whatever reason your direct supervisor does not take it serious, then don't stop there. Go up the ladder. Make sure that vehicle is safe to drive, because remember, it's protecting you and protecting someone else. Let's talk about attitude. Let's talk about your attitude and how it can be adjusted. Our personalities are not settled in stone. As we grow older, our personalities change, our likes and dislikes change, and with those changes become strengths and weaknesses. First of all, begin your day by making a mental list of those things that you should appreciate and are thankful for. Why not start the day off positive? Lord knows when you get out there, there's going to be a lot of things happening that's going to make you mad. So might as well start out with an attitude that's ready for it and an attitude that's prepared to drive. Secondly, love life, because people who love life want to preserve it. Enjoy it. I know we all have problems. I know we all have things that impact our lives that make us react differently. You can control all of that by the way you control your attitude. Thirdly, be patient. Everybody is not the same as you, and everyone doesn't have the same strengths and weaknesses you do, and everybody doesn't look at everything the same way you look. So they'll be patient with everyone else. As you drive, you see someone who's driving improperly, don't tell them and honk the horn and let the world know. Back off and keep them in front of you. You can keep an eye on them and stay out of their way. Fourthly, trust and believe in yourself. You know, you are the driver of that vehicle. You wouldn't be given that vehicle to drive if someone didn't think you had the talent to be able to do it and the ability to do so safely. So understand that. Next, sometimes being smart is not enough. You might be the best driver, the best understanding individual of all the rules and regulations, but the reality of the matter is the other guy might not be. So therefore, just having knowledge does not mean it's going to take care of you. And finally, remember there's no such thing as failure. We make mistakes, learn from them, change, and don't make them again. All this means that you need to have an outlook that's willing to change, willing to grow, and willing to become the best that you can be. Now I want to take a moment and I want to share with you 5 different types of drivers and see which type you are. And I will tell you that you may say that you might be all 5 of these, depending on what you think. The first one is our automatic driver. This is the individual who's been driving forever, knows how to drive, understands the rules of the road, understands how the speed limits, understands what the lights mean, understands to look for everything going on. And they hop behind the wheel, they start up the engine, and they start driving, and it's just the way I've always done it before. In fact, they don't even really have to think while they're driving. It's all habit. Secondly, we have the timid driver. That's the individual who is afraid of what might happen. I had 2 boys when they were younger, and we had them learn how to drive, and they were stuck with the responsibility of riding with their mother because their mother had more patience than their father. My oldest son was the guy who got behind the wheel, and at the age of 17, he's driving his first car, and he thinks he's been doing it his whole life, and I don't need any instruction, Dad. We spent a lot of time with him. My youngest was afraid. His car got going 30 miles an hour, its speed limit was 40, and he got nervous because it was going so fast. He had to work his way through it. He was more of a timid driver, and he had to learn to have confidence in himself and his ability in the process. So there's that timid driver. That's the one on the road who's driving slow, who's looking for something, coming up the intersections, and is holding everybody up. That's our timid driver. Third one's the speeder. This is the one who is always late to everything they have to go to. And because they're always late, they're always pushing the envelope. The speed limit's 45. That means I can go 5 over. I can go up to 49 or 50, and that's still within the speed limit. At least that's their thought process. And they're always hurrying to somewhere, and they're hurrying because they've got to get there, and I can't be late. The speeder is someone you got to watch out for because they're not always the individual who has their eyes focused on things that are going around them as they should. The fourth is the aggressive driver. Now, if you talk to any insurance organization and they deal with fleet safety, they will tell you aggressive drivers are bad. Now, I'm going to disagree with that because I don't believe being an aggressive driver is necessarily bad. I believe an uncontrolled aggressive driver is bad. You can be a outgoing, positive, aggressive, take charge type person and be an excellent driver as long as you take into consideration all the areas that you need to spend time with and you watch. The aggressive driver is that individual who's going to take charge. He's going to maybe weave in and out. He's going to do everything you can possibly think of as he goes from point A to point B. Hopefully he's cautious enough that he doesn't cause the accident, and hopefully he doesn't force somebody else off the road. And then the last one I'm going to call just simply the good driver. That good driver is that individual who knows his strengths and knows his weaknesses. That's an individual who knows that he or she needs to be looking around and looking at the area that's around him. That the focus is on what's taking place, so that he knows that will impact their driving. The good driver is the one who may be a little aggressive some days, but some days when the roads are not as clear as they should be, or there's a problem with traffic, they're a little more timid, a little more cautious. In other words, their personality flexes with the circumstances they're dealing with. So those 5 drivers, which one are you, or which one do you lean towards most? That's really a question you ought to ask, because you need to understand the type of driver you are. And then you need to understand the type of driver you want to be. And if they're not the same, it's your responsibility to change and to become the driver that you need to be. So as we've talked about attitude, and as we've talked about your dealing with yourself and understanding this, all that's important, because as we go into the rest of this class and the 6 that will follow, we're going to be talking about areas of driving and things that impact that driving, some of which you have control over and some of which you don't. Your physical condition affects you as a driver. Your eyesight. Do you have glasses? Do you have them checked regularly? Is your eyes getting weaker? Do you have great long vision or short vision? Your eyesight is an ever-changing process. As a child growing up, I was one of these kids who loved to read. And my mom and dad said, go to bed, and I went to bed with the flashlight under the covers reading a book. As you can see, I wear glasses. That's because I strained my eyes early on in my life, and I wore glasses my whole life. I need regular prescriptions because my eyes are changing. I'm also getting older, and as I get older, my eyes change more too. That's part of driving, to recognize your weaknesses. Secondly, hearing problems. I've already said I'm getting older, but I don't have hearing problems. But I work with a guy who does. I'm married to a wife who does. And so therefore, they don't hear as clearly when conversations take place. Certain tonal quality of noises may not necessarily be as clear to them as others. And so you're driving down the street, if you don't hear the horn honk or you don't hear the ambulance siren, you may be walking right into an accident and have no way of knowing it. You ought to have your hearing checked. The older you get, it ought to be more often. You ought to ask yourself, how is my hearing? Your mobility. Each of us have different areas in our life that may be problems with our mobility. You may have trouble walking. You may have trouble sitting for long periods of time. You may have a shoulder that hurts when you sit, and that will cause you to move in the seat. All that impacts your driving, because as your body is functioning as it's capable of functioning, it is also impacting the ability of your driving. Fatigue, drowsiness. I think we live in a society, everybody's tired. And so when you drive, you got to understand that. You need to do things to prevent yourself from being drowsy. We'll talk about that a little later on in this session. Next, your age. How old are you? I'm not talking about how old are you by numeric numbers. Have you ever known somebody who might be young in age but act like they're old, or vice versa? Someone who's older in age but acts like a kid all the time? What's your age? How do you behave in that age? And what limitations does that age put upon you? So your physical condition does impact you as a driver. Secondly, your mental condition affects you how you drive too, because your mental condition deals with your attitude, your emotions, and your stress. Every one of us are dealing with daily emotions. Every one of us deals with stress. Stress is not bad. How we deal with it is. Guidelines to consider. A must, if you will, prescription to being in control of yourself. First of all, stress. Every day we deal with just getting out of bed and getting ready to go to work. It starts the process of stress. If you have an argument at home before you leave, you're dealing with stress. If you're worrying about paying bills, if you're worrying about the job you're doing, all that impacts your attitude and stress. And stress impacts your emotions, as it also impacts you physically. So you need to learn to deal with stress. And there are a lot of self-help books and videos out there, but I've learned over the years the best way to deal with stress is to put it in perspective, to recognize whatever I'm worried about, is it really going to enter and alter my life in a manner that I can't handle? And most times you're going to say no. Secondly, emotions. You may be listening to the radio while you're driving down the road and your favorite baseball team is playing baseball and it's the championship game, and you hear the radio announcer announce your favorite player just hit the ball and it's going, it's gone, and that home run wins the game. Now you're driving 45 miles an hour down the road. Are you impacted by what you just heard? You sure are. And does that impact, could it be you were not paying attention as much as you should have? Or that your body reacts in excitement and you turn the wheel, which you didn't intend to do? You see, emotions do impact our lives. When we are angry, when we're happy, all those have impacts. Recognize that, and everybody reacts differently to their emotions. So we've got to learn to deal with them and to deal with them in a manner safely. And then finally, your attitude. How you look at life. Is life a bowl of cherries or is it the pits? Reality is you will deal with your emotions. Your attitude will impact those emotions. How can you survive changing mental conditions? First of all, recognize you're changing. Secondly, actively figure out ways to deal with those changes that might be impacting your ability to function. And thirdly, there's always the possibility of seeking help. You don't have to be a loner. You don't have to be someone that can't get help from someone else. So remember, your body and your mind impacts the way you drive. Let's talk about, we said earlier, fatigue is a problem. Fatigue is always a problem. I don't think I've been the type of person that I get up early every morning. I don't care what day of the week it is. I'm a 5:30 riser. Sleeping in to me is sleeping till 6:30, and I usually wake up drowsy. Getting up early, I get going. That means by the end of the day, I'm getting more tired. I do not like to drive at night anymore because it's nighttime. I've been up a lot of hours. I'm potentially drowsy, and I'm older. My vision isn't what it should be. So I'm not a good candidate to drive long-haul trucking or to drive across country or to drive trips at night. I'm a morning daylight driver. Well, I recognize that in me. And those times I have to drive at night, I take precautions to make sure that I'm safe. But drowsiness is something that happens to all of us. Got a client who puts their people on the road 8 to 10 hours a day. They give them breaks every couple hours. Well, that's good. But what does that person do with the break? Some of them sleep. Some of them eat. Of course, that'll make you more drowsy. Some of them will look at their phones and watch that, making their eyes more tired. You see, a break without resting your eyes and your body is not really a break. So when you're driving long times, you need to pull over the side of the road and do something different to make it a break. Get out of the vehicle, walk around, walk into someplace, talk to somebody. Take a break in that routine so that you become more alert in the process. Sleepiness and drowsing causes fatigue. Fatigue is, by definition, your body not functioning at 100%. So therefore, if you're sleepy or you find yourself drowsy, but you can't pull over and take a nap, there are other things you can do. We talk about cracking the window so there's some fresh air coming in. Talk about the radio and listen to the music. I'm not asking you for friends in the car, but singing along with the song might be a way of keeping you wet. Moving your seat, changing your posture. All this are things designed to help your body stay alert. If they don't work, pull over and take a nap. Yep, it may not be the best day to do it, but pull over and take a nap. That 10-minute, 15-minute power nap does wonders for fatigue. It'll provide you another hour or two of competency in driving. As you look at your drive and as you look what you're doing, recognize you are in control of your body unless you want to relinquish that. I wouldn't tell you you don't ever want to do that. What are some signs of becoming drowsy? Well, how about missing an exit? How about hitting a rumble strip on the side of the road and all of a sudden you feel the vibration? How about drifting between lanes? How about inconsistently shifting or intermittently braking? Every once in a while you touch the brake. Following vehicles too closely or slowing down. Everybody else is going 45 and you're going 35. That's drowsy, that's daydreaming. Have you ever driven down the road and all of a sudden you see a marker on the side of the road that you know, and you know there was something else just before you got to that marker, you don't even remember seeing it? We call that inattentive blindness. That's something that we all sometimes do and fail to realize that it takes place. You might drive as much as 150 feet and have total no recollection of what was there. Hope there was no truck in the way or some pedestrian crossing the street. You need to recognize fatigue is something you've got to control. How about anger? And how about aging? Let's deal with aging first. How old are you? Okay. How old are you physically? I have a friend who's 28 years old, but he weighs 350 pounds. He cannot walk more than 10 feet without falling over. And he doesn't look like he's 27, 28. Looks like he's about 58, 60, or 100. Because physically, he's not taking care of himself. I have dealt with that myself over the years and still working on that process. But it's something that we all do. Physical condition impacts our aging. Some of us age gracefully and some of us do not. But aging does impact you as a driver. It impacts, as we've already said, your vision. It impacts your hearing. It impacts your mental cognitive ability, your ability to understand things and comprehend things, not totally, but also even quickly. It causes you to not be able to go from point A to point B mentally as quickly as you did when you were younger. Having trouble remembering destinations. Learning to write notes more instead of doing it by memory. Getting lost in familiar places. Feeling confused when entering or exiting a highway. All these are situations that can be caused by aging. You need to know your strengths and your weaknesses. Driving a vehicle is a personal responsibility. It is a corporate responsibility to let you behind the wheel of a vehicle, but it's personal to drive. Physical functions change. You get diminished physical functions as you grow older. All these things are things that are impacting you as a driver. We've already talked about aggressive drivers. What's an aggressive driver like? Well, he's that person who expresses their frustration all the time. They necessarily don't always get happy with the person they're following. They tailgate. They drive in and out. They frequently change lanes. They may say words and flash symbols to the other driver and honk their horn. Why? Because their goal is to get from point A to point B and to do so as quickly as possible. And so anybody in their way is truly somebody in their way. An aggressive driver is somebody that can be a danger to himself and everyone else. You need to concentrate. You need to relax. You need to drive at the posted speed. And you need to do what you need to do to be safe. And if there's an aggressive driver that zooms by you and honks his horn and you see him in front of you, that's a good place for him. You stay back up a little bit, slow down, let him go off in the distance because you don't need him around you. Driving while angry. Ever leave the house and get in a fight with your kids or your wife? You get behind the wheel? You're not the same person that you would have been normally, especially if the fight or argument wasn't resolved and anger's still there. Anger impacts your emotions, and when your emotions are charged, your thinking is diminished. That's a scientific fact, and everyone suffers from it. So therefore, when you get behind the wheel of a vehicle, ask yourself, am I emotionally in control? Have I let something happen in my life that's made me angry? I remember once I had a client call me and he said, I've got a problem. One of my employees came to work today and he just got here and he told me his son was killed last night. And he said, what do I do? And I said, well, you think he's not capable of working? I said, he's torn up. I said, well, then I think he needs to go home. But I don't think you need to let him drive home. I think someone needs to take him home and someone else take his vehicle home. And obviously you're going to be condoling the family. I think it should be a supervisor. And that's what they did. They took the employee home, took his vehicle home, spent a few moments with the family, offering condolences. You don't think that created a relationship? Sure did. But also it created a situation where you had a safe employee. Every circumstance is different. Every day is different. Whenever we're in a situation in which we have our emotions involved, we need to recognize those emotions can take us out of control. Your attitude towards others will determine your ability to drive. Last on our subject is this: road rage. Ever seen somebody or have a situation take place when road rage is involved? Ever been involved in a road rage situation? Someone cuts you off and you're going to go after and tell them what you think. Had somebody sideswipe me and I chased them almost 4.5 miles through the city. They wouldn't stop until I finally stopped, had their plate, and called the police. I didn't know what I was going to do when I caught them, but I thought they should stop because they sideswiped me and hit and damaged my vehicle. Road rage is something that happens sometimes innocently and becomes a major problem. I want to remind you, you never know if the guy you're chasing might have a gun. And if you have one, you shouldn't be chasing anybody, because that weapon is something that could cause harm to not only you, but everyone else. We are in a very important job when we're driving vehicles. And how we drive those vehicles will impact how we live. Hank Williams, and I'm not going to sing to you, wrote a song many years ago called Attitude Adjustment. I'd have you look it up. It's kind of fun. The song basically is about a guy who goes into a bar and he drinks. And as he's in the bar, he drinks a little bit too much. And there's a lot of parts of stories to this story, but he drinks too much and the bartender has to leave. Well, he doesn't. And he gets into an argument with the bartender, and the bartender gives him an attitude adjustment. Basically, the bartender beats him up, takes him out of the building, and throws him in the parking lot. And he sings about this attitude adjustment. He talks about all the people he knew who needed attitude adjustments. Well, I'm not saying you need that type of attitude adjustment, but all of us need to examine our attitudes and to see, are we truly ready to drive? Thank you very much. This was very good. Now, each of you, there's a 5-question quiz that you have to take because of this session, and then we go on to part 2.